For the first time in my entire life, I actually think the DCU might beat the MCU. And I know how insane that sounds. A few years ago, that statement would have had the chronic Reddit users assemble like the actual Avengers and ratio you into oblivion. It's no surprise DC was absolute chaos. Hell, even the DCCW shows caught shit harder than a toilet. But those shows have been put to rest, God bless their souls. Nothing was ever going their way, and it felt like every time one of their films fumbled, their first thought was to nuke the timeline entirely. That's how we ended up with the cluster of a mess that was the Snyderverse.
Kalel, no!
But now, everything's shifted, and somehow, against all odds, DC feels alive again. It's vibrant, it's full of potential, and the guy running it loves writing projects where John Cena violently makes out with his wife. Meanwhile, Marvel, the undisputed king for over a decade, feels like it's flatlining harder than Rhodey in Civil War. It's honestly crazy how fast the magic disappeared. I guess Thanos snapped that away too. And it wasn't just one bad movie. This was the most domino effect chaos I've ever seen. The Multiverse Saga, which was supposed to be the next grand chapter and even top the Infinity Saga, has been nothing but misfires and unfulfilled promises. Let's look at No Way Home. Sure, it seems like an absolute win for Marvel, blending fan service and genuine heart perfectly, but it also taught Marvel the wrong lesson. They started thinking nostalgia was easier and more profitable than innovation, because why tell an impactful Spider-Man story when you can just have goofy fun times with the villain of the best Spider-Man film to date, who accidentally murdered his wife.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Dr. Otto Octavius.
Wait, no, seriously, what's your actual name?
And let's just rip the band-aid off. The MCU has been failing harder than a Jared Leto movie. And it's not just that some of the movies are bad, they're bad in a way that feels systemic. I'm looking at you, Quantumania. That film was supposed to launch the next Thanos-level threat, but it ended up being shit, looking like shit, and somehow managed to pull a 46% on Rotten Tomatoes. Bruh, even Dark World didn't fall that low, and the projects that aren't bad just don't seem to matter. Remember Shang-Chi? I'm sure Kevin Feige doesn't. A movie with great characters and awesome concepts, yet they've been completely MIA ever since. And you might be asking, how does Shang-Chi factor into the Multiverse Saga? Beats me. Because we haven't seen him in 4 years. It doesn't even feel like Marvel knows what projects to make anymore. And on top of that, their formula is so played out. I just don't feel like Marvel has much of a purpose outside of being obligated by Disney to make Wonder Man. Who asked for this? Huh? So what's DC's secret? Simple. The biggest reason I know they have a legitimate shot is because James Gunn had a front row seat to the spectacular dumpster fire of the DCEU and took meticulous notes on exactly what not to do.
Write that down, write that down!
And I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. The old DC universe was pure chaos. Every movie felt like a panicked, soft reboot of the last one. And they were so desperate to catch up to Marvel that they rushed straight into Batman v Superman, trying to get to the Avengers right after their first movie, Man of Steel, which wasn't even that well received. They didn't even try to give us real character work. Remember when they tried to make Superman God, and the result was this grim, joyless assassination of two of the most iconic heroes in history, all because their moms had the same name. And then came Justice League. That thing was Frankenstein together by two directors with completely different visions, slapped with a $300 million budget only to score lower than the infamous Batman and Robin. Then, in one of the most ironic twists in Hollywood history, James Gunn shows up. The dude Marvel fired over old tweets suddenly becomes the only person crazy enough to take on fixing their biggest competitor. And he saw the chaos. He knew what he was getting himself into. After the Suicide Squad, he started small. He took a D-list character from his own movie and gave us Peacemaker, a show nobody asked for, about a guy everybody hated, and packed it with so much unexpected heart and trauma and bizarre humor that it became a word-of-mouth hit. And then this summer, he dropped Superman, and what a breath of fresh air it was. Superman was the hopeful Boy Scout we know and love. Lex was actually bald, and audiences finally felt that spark again. On its own, it was simple, sincere, and hopeful. A story about a good guy just trying to do the right thing in a complicated world. Personally, I thought it was decent, and I didn't love it like everyone else did because it still felt a bit messy. But even then, after years of Snyder's attempts at making Superman a god, that simple idea hit harder than any giant CGI space laser we've seen 1,000 times. And right there, that's the whole secret. Gunn doesn't write superheroes. He writes deeply flawed, messed up, and relatable people who just happen to wear superhero costumes. He understands that a character's baggage, their guilt, their kindness, and sometimes even their stupid jokes are way more interesting than their laser eyes. But the old DCEU tried to connect its universe through empty spectacle. Gunn is connecting his through shared emotion. And it's honestly wild that the guy who made the entire world cry over a talking raccoon and a dude with a toilet on his head is now the best hope DC has ever had.
It's not just a boulder, it's a rock.
And when you really drill down into it, the core difference between the two studios right now can be seen by comparing their leaders. Watching James Gunn and Kevin Feige feels like watching two completely different species of filmmaker, even though only one of them actually directs movies. Kevin Feige is the chess master, the architect, the guy who spent a decade meticulously building the most financially successful and culturally dominant cinematic universe in history. And I will always give him his credit for that. What he and his team accomplished from Iron Man to Endgame was a miracle of long-form storytelling that changed Hollywood forever. But now, it feels like that same rigid system that brought him so much success has become his gilded cage. Let's be honest, the MCU today has lost its spark and is just pumping out soulless content. Everything in the MCU feels overmanaged and controlled. Gunn, on the other hand, thrives in chaos. He's a writer and director first. He's trying to tell a good story, and he trusts that if the story is good enough, the universe will follow. And sure, that could hurt him and DC later, but I'll get to that soon. He builds from character and emotion, not from release schedules and spreadsheets. And he doesn't care if something's weird or awkward or gory or straight up stupid, as long as it feels emotionally real. Just look at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In a sea of mediocre Marvel projects, that movie stood out as a masterpiece. It made over $845 million worldwide, not because it set up the next big crossover, but because it was deeply personal and heartbreakingly human. It proved that audiences are desperate to feel something again at the theater. It made millions of people cry over a CGI raccoon, and not in a cheap, manipulative way. You actually felt his pain and his trauma and his redemption, because Gunn cares about the why behind the spectacle, and that's what separates them. But the biggest and most undeniable difference between Marvel and DC right now isn't on the screen, it's in the audience. It's the fans. Marvel fans aren't angry anymore, and honestly, anger would almost be better, because anger means you still care, but now they're just tired. It's not rage anymore, it's burnout. The comment sections that used to be full of hype and speculation are now just places where people go to complain. And from what I've seen, barely anyone's making theory videos anymore besides me and the goats like Eric Voss on New Rockstars, who are still putting out fire content. But the overall energy is gone. Back in the Infinity Saga, every single project was a can't miss event. I mean, I even dragged myself to see bad movies like Captain Marvel, a movie that somehow made over $1 billion almost purely off the Endgame hype. That's how invested we were. But now, you can skip half the Disney Plus shows and honestly most of the movies and still have a perfect grasp of the non-existent overarching plot. And the saddest part, people don't hate Marvel, they just miss loving it. Meanwhile, DC fans are in this strange unfamiliar new place called cautious optimism. For an entire decade, being a DC fan meant bracing for disappointment. But after Superman and Peacemaker, something changed. A little bit of hope crept in, and you can feel it online. The energy is shifting. People are excited to talk about DC again. Fan casting and story theories are popping up. There's genuine curiosity about where all of this is going. That feeling, that spark, is something Marvel used to own completely, and now it's a total role reversal. Marvel fans are watching out of habit or obligation, but DC fans, they're watching out of hope. So I guess this is the final gamble, and you've got Marvel in this desperate rebuild mode, while DC is finally cautiously breathing again. And I really think what happens in the next couple of years isn't just about the box office, it's going to decide the entire future of what a superhero movie can even be. And let's be honest, I think Marvel knows they're in deep trouble. They're betting the entire farm on just 3 projects. But for me, the foundation just isn't there anymore. I'm looking at Brand New Day, and like I said in my last video, if it's not a grounded street level story, I'm out. Then you've got Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, which I'm hyped for, but I have to ask, who are we even supposed to be rooting for? Who's the emotional core of this team? And honestly, I'm just tired of having to do homework before a movie, and it feels like the audience is too. Bringing back Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, I'm sorry, but that doesn't feel like a stroke of genius. It feels like a bright red panic button, a desperate attempt to use nostalgia to patch a sinking ship. But I don't think for a second that DC has this in the bag, and that's what has me worried. They're walking the same fragile tightrope. I mean, we all saw it with Peacemaker Season 2. It was a brilliant concept on paper, but for me, it felt like the entire season was just spinning its wheels, just reinforcing a trauma loop for Chris that we already fully understood. And all the best stuff, the things that were genuinely building a new world like Flag Zero, Lex Luthor, and Checkmate, it felt like I was watching trailers for a much better show that kept getting interrupted by the main plot. And that cliffhanger, it wasn't an ending, it was homework for the Man of Tomorrow movie. And that's a seriously worrying sign. And I think that's what makes this moment so insane and so critical. For the first time ever, Marvel is fighting nostalgia fatigue and DC is fighting to prove their new hope is real. And I think if Marvel fails now, it won't just hurt their brand, it'll break their myth. It'll be their Rise of Skywalker moment, a finale so unsatisfying it makes you question why you cared in the first place.
No! God
please, no! No!
But I believe if Gunn learns from the stumbles, and that absolutely includes his own, and he keeps his focus on character, then for the first time in history, DC might not just compete, they might actually take the crown. Because after all of it, after all the highs and the flops and the reboots, that's what it all comes down to. Because heart always beats hype, and that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think, and check out my latest video right here.